I was halfway through sanding the edge of an old cedar fence post when my radio crackled on my hip. Unit 6, got a call from 457, Windmill Trail, trespassing, possible juvenile offender. I squinted at the sky, the Texas sun already beating down hard by 9 a.m., and keyed the mic. Dispatch, that's my address. There was a pause. Copy that. Caller reported a young girl trespassing and refusing to leave the premises. Description matches your daughter, Sheriff. I sighed, the kind that starts from your heels and rattles your bones on the way up. 10-4, I'll handle it. I unclipped the radio and set it gently on the fence post, then wiped my hands on the faded denim of my jeans. There's something surreal about hearing a call go out for your own kid. Even more surreal when you know exactly who made it. Karen. Full name, Karen Holloway. HOA president, self-proclaimed moral compass of Lone Mesa Estates, and a woman whose thirst for authority made a rattlesnake look diplomatic. Let me back up. I'm Sheriff Caleb Dawson. 51 years old. Widower. Father of one fiercely independent daughter named Ellie, age 16 going on 30. I've served this county for 23 years and lived on the same 100-acre ranch just outside Lone Mesa Estates for nearly as long. When Ellie was little, she'd ride shotgun in my cruiser with a juice box while I did rounds. These days, she helps me mend fences and rescue stray livestock from the gully behind the barn. And Karen? Karen bought her beige McMansion 3 years ago, right after her divorce from a pharmaceutical VP. She joined the HOA board 6 months later and ascended to president like a buzzard spotting fresh roadkill. Since then, she's rewritten half the neighborhood charter, enforced lawn height regulations with the precision of a military drill sergeant, and managed to alienate almost every neighbor within a 2-mile radius. But it wasn't until Ellie started a small chicken coop on the edge of our property that things got personal. See, Ellie has this dream. Wants to be a vet, loves animals more than most people. She started raising a few hens, rescued battery cage layers, featherbear but feisty. Built the coop herself out of salvaged wood, right near the property line where the ranch meets the HOA's master plan suburbia. Legally, it's our land. No easement. No overlap. Just grass and barbed wire and a girl who loves her birds. But apparently, that was too much freedom for Karen to stomach. First came the emails, accusations that the coop violated HOA sightline standards. Then came the friendly visits, Karen showing up in golf carts with laminated pamphlets and warnings about animal-related allergens drifting into HOA airspace. I tried to keep the peace. Invited her to walk the fence line with the county assessor's map in hand. She declined. Said she knew what she saw, and what she saw was a teenager harboring livestock unfit for a community of this caliber. 2 nights ago, I found a dead chicken in the coop. No claw marks. No blood. Just neck twisted, body dumped like garbage. Ellie cried for an hour. I didn't. I checked the cameras. Saw a silhouette slip through the fence after midnight. Couldn't prove it was Karen. But I knew. So today, when the call came through that someone had reported Ellie for trespassing, I didn't grab my badge. I grabbed my Stetson, climbed into the ranch truck, and rolled down the drive like thunder. When I pulled up to the fence line, sure enough, there was Ellie, crouched beside the coop, stroking the back of our new rescue hen, Sassy. And standing 10 feet away with her arms crossed and a phone still clutched in her hand. Karen. She was wearing one of her usual linen pantsuits and a visor too large for her head. Behind her, a Lone Mesa patrol cruiser idled, its rookie deputy looking thoroughly confused. Sheriff Dawson, she said, her voice sweet and sour at once. Thank goodness you're here. I didn't say anything. Just stepped out of the truck and nodded at the deputy. I'll take it from here, Officer Winslow. Yes sir, he muttered, almost apologetically, and backed away like he'd stepped into something rotten. Karen turned on him like a hawk on a rabbit. Now hold on. That child is in violation of Code 4.2a, unauthorized presence on HOA property and aggressive behavior toward a board member. I looked at Ellie, who was still holding the hen like it was a glass ornament. She rolled her eyes but stayed silent. I turned back to Karen. This is my land, Karen. Been mine since '02. That fence is 3 feet inside my boundary line, which means you're the one trespassing. Karen's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Her eyes flicked to the patrol cruiser, then to the deputy, then back to me. I have GPS screenshots, she declared, yanking her phone up like it was a warrant. I used a property app, and it clearly shows. I took a slow step forward. That app doesn't override county records, Karen. I should know. I sign off on M. You can't be objective. This is a conflict of interest. I smiled. Then feel free to file a complaint. Just make sure it goes through the proper channels. Ellie stood now, calm but firm, and walked over to me. She didn't say anything either. Just slipped her hand into mine. Karen sputtered for a second, then pointed dramatically. I will not tolerate vigilante children violating our peace. You'll tolerate whatever the law allows, I said, keeping my voice level. Now if you're done disturbing my daughter on private land, I suggest you head on home before I cite you for harassment. Her face turned a shade redder than I thought human skin could manage. This isn't over, she hissed. It is for today. And just like that, she turned, heels clicking on gravel as she stalked off toward her pristine subdivision, every step punctuated by the furious vibration of her phone still in hand. But I knew better. This wasn't over. Karen had made it personal. And she didn't yet know just how personal it was going to get. 2 days after the coop confrontation, I found a drone hovering just above our barn. At first, I thought it was some teenager getting creative with summer boredom, but when it dipped low enough to trigger the motion light and then buzzed toward the chicken run, I knew it wasn't innocent. This was surveillance, calculated, quiet, and pointed straight at my daughter's rescue hens. Ellie noticed it too. She ran outside waving a shovel like a battle flag, shouting up at the little flying camera. It zipped away fast, but not before I got a good look at the brand, one of those expensive, GPS-enabled models with 4K cameras and a long flight time. The kind you don't buy unless you plan on spying with style. I followed the drone's path with binoculars from the deck. It zipped over the property line and landed right behind a beige stucco house with a manicured lawn and a mailbox shaped like a miniature colonial home. Karen's house. She's doubling down, Ellie said that evening as we sat on the porch, sipping sweet tea while Bear, our border collie, patrolled the perimeter like the furry sheriff he thought he was. She's pushing, I corrected. Because she's hoping we'll push back the wrong way. Ellie looked at me, her expression somewhere between fire and tears. Why does she hate us so much? I leaned back in my chair, stared out across the pasture. Because she can't control us. That night, I filed an official drone harassment complaint under Ellie's name. Not as a father, but as the sheriff. I logged the footage, wrote the report, and sent it to the County Code Enforcement Office and the FAA Regional Desk. I'd play it by the book, even if Karen never had. The next morning, it got worse. Someone dumped a sack of commercial-grade chicken feed, laced with some kind of bittering agent, over the fence. The hens wouldn't touch it, but Sassy pecked once and immediately began foaming at the beak. Ellie rushed her to the vet while I traced the tire tracks leading away from the fence. They matched the low-profile tread, same kind Karen's Lexus RX left on the HOA's paved roads. I didn't have proof. Not enough for court. But the vet confirmed Sassy had ingested trace amounts of a common rodenticide. Ellie sat in the waiting room with Sassy curled in her lap, refusing to cry. She's gonna make it, the vet said, his voice kind but grim. Barely. That evening, I held a community meeting. Not as sheriff. As Caleb Dawson, lifelong resident, father, neighbor. I invited every family living in Lone Mesa Estates and the surrounding county properties. We met at the old fairground pavilion just past the train tracks. I expected a dozen people. 47 showed up. I told them what had happened. I didn't accuse anyone by name. I just laid out the timeline, the drone, the poison, the harassment, the false call to the police. And then I showed them the coop. Pictures. Before and after. The hens with names Ellie had painted on wooden signs. The donation receipt from the shelter. The vet bill we paid out of pocket. When I finished, I said nothing for a full minute. Let the silence settle. Then one voice spoke. She tried to fine me $600 for having a swing set. Another, she said my roses were too aggressive in color. A third, she changed the bylaws to ban RVs the day after my dad moved in with his trailer. It spilled out like floodwater behind a broken dam. Story after story. Seniors afraid to speak up. Single moms too tired to fight. Veterans, teachers, even a retired judge who once caught Karen peeking into his backyard with binoculars. By the end of the night, I had a clipboard full of signatures. People ready to challenge the HOA leadership. Some wanted to dissolve it completely. Others wanted Karen removed by a board vote. But all agreed on one thing: they'd had enough. Back at home, Ellie was asleep on the couch, Sassy nestled in a blanket at her feet. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We're not alone anymore." But Karen wasn't done yet. The next morning, Ellie was missing. Her school called. Said she never checked in. Her phone went straight to voicemail. My heart dropped through my boots. And then I saw it. The coop door, unlatched. Sassy, gone. A note tucked under a rock beside the fence. One line, typed and printed in bold font. This ends when the animals are gone. I read it once. Twice. And then I put on my badge. Karen had just made the worst mistake of her life. The cruiser's engine roared to life before the sun had fully crested the horizon. I hadn't slept. Not after finding that note. Ellie gone. Sassy missing. A veiled threat typed in all caps like a ransom demand from someone who thought intimidation was a tool instead of a trap. I knew it was Karen. My gut knew, my pulse knew, and every last fiber of my spine screamed it. But I needed more than gut. I needed proof. So I started with the cameras. We keep trail cams around the ranch, mostly for coyotes and the occasional stray ATV, but they've got motion sensors and infrared. I popped out the memory cards one by one, uploaded them into my laptop on the front porch, and fast-forwarded through the last 12 hours. At 3:14 a.m., one camera caught a figure slipping through the west gate, the one hidden behind the windbreak of pines. Small frame, ponytail, flashlight in hand. Ellie. I leaned closer, heart hammering. She wasn't being dragged. She wasn't panicking. She was following something. I switched to the next camera. At 3:17 a.m., a shadow moved ahead of her. Small. Low to the ground. Sassy. And behind her? Another figure. Taller. Male. Hoodie, gloves. Carrying a pet crate. I cursed under my breath. This wasn't Ellie running off. She was chasing after her hen. And someone who knew the layout of our land well enough to avoid the obvious cameras, was leading her right off it. The crate. The lure. This was calculated. I switched to the camera at the tree line near the HOA development. 3:23 a.m. Ellie was visible. Hesitating. Calling out. I turned the volume up. Sassy? Sassy, girl, don't run, hey. Then the audio crackled. A car door slammed. An engine started. Headlights briefly lit up the screen, blurry, but visible. SUV. Light-colored. Lexus badge flashed for a second as it turned toward Lone Mesa's main road. I hit pause. I knew that car. I'd seen it parked crooked in the HOA lot more times than I could count. Karen's. I transmitted the footage to the county server. Tagged it for evidence. And I grabbed my radio. This is Unit 6. Suspected child abduction in progress. Lone Mesa perimeter. Subject is a minor, last seen entering HOA property boundary. Suspect vehicle Lexus RX, champagne silver, partial plate Victor Zebra 4, possibly operated by Karen Holloway. Request immediate BOLO and visual confirmation. Copy that, Unit 6. Alerting local patrol. What's your ETA? 2 minutes. I'm already rolling. I blew through the ranch gate doing 60, lights flashing. No siren, not yet. I didn't want Karen knowing I was coming. She had a 2-hour head start. But if Ellie was still nearby, if she was safe, if this was just another twisted scare tactic and not something darker, then speed mattered. I pulled up to the perimeter of Lone Mesa Estates. Technically, I had no authority beyond the county line without cause. But Ellie was cause enough. I parked behind a magnolia bush just before the cul-de-sac where Karen's house sat like a smug crown jewel. I approached on foot. And that's when I heard it, muffled squawking. Coming from the side yard. I edged around the hydrangeas and ducked under the porch's motion light. There, tucked behind a rose trellis, was the crate. Sassy inside. Alive, wide-eyed, feathers fluffed in panic. Next to her sat Ellie. Curled against the crate, her arm draped protectively over the hen, asleep but breathing. She was safe. I exhaled a prayer and stepped forward. Ellie, I whispered. She stirred. Her eyes fluttered open and widened in recognition. Dad? I'm here, I said, kneeling down. You okay? She nodded. She ran out. I didn't know where she went. Then someone grabbed her. I chased them, but they dropped the crate here and left. I helped her to her feet. And that's when the porch light flipped on behind us. Karen's voice cut through the early morning stillness like a chainsaw through porcelain. What are you doing? You're trespassing. That's criminal. I turned. She stood in a pink silk robe, coffee cup in hand, as if she hadn't just baited a teenager onto her property like a predator luring a fox. You brought her here, I said flatly. Karen blinked. I don't know what you're talking about. That child is unstable. She broke into my yard. You lured her here with an animal you took from her coop. Karen scoffed. Prove it. I already did. I held up my phone. The video from the trail cam looped behind the screen's glare. Karen's face paled. You can't use that. This is private property. No, I said, stepping forward, badge flashing in the porch light. This is a crime scene. Her mouth opened, then closed. You said this ends when the animals are gone, I continued. That note? That threat? That was your handwriting. We matched it to your HOA violation forms. You're bluffing, she hissed. I'm a sheriff, I said. I don't bluff. Behind me, Ellie picked up Sassy's crate. And for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of fear in Karen's eyes. This is over, I said. You'll be hearing from the district attorney. As we walked away, Karen screamed something incoherent about legal rights and community ordinances, but it faded behind us like the last gasp of a storm losing power. Back in the cruiser, Ellie finally spoke. Dad? Yeah? Is it okay if I build a bigger coop? I smiled. Build a whole barn if you want. By noon, the warrant was signed. Not a big one. Just enough to search Karen's property for potential evidence tied to the unlawful removal of livestock and endangerment of a minor. But even a small warrant, properly executed, feels like an earthquake in a place like Lone Mesa Estates. I made sure I wasn't the one delivering it. Deputy Ortiz and Sergeant Boone knocked on Karen's door, flanked by a third officer and a body-worn camera that didn't miss a second of her performance. She opened the door looking like she'd just stepped out of a spa, silk scarf, sunglasses, sipping green juice. Can I help you? She asked, voice smooth as velvet. Yes, ma'am, Boone replied, tone professional but clipped. We have a signed search warrant pertaining to last night's incident involving minor endangerment and theft of livestock. Karen tried to laugh, the kind of brittle chuckle that says, "I'm innocent," while her pupils scream otherwise. "Are you serious?" "For a chicken." "No, ma'am." "For a child," Ortiz replied. They entered. I watched the footage later. Watched as Karen tried to deflect. Said she was a pillar of the community. Said her lawyer was on speed dial. Said she had no idea how that crate ended up by her trellis or why there was a typed note in her trash that matched the thread left on our ranch. But the search found more than that. Tucked into a desk drawer beneath a stack of HOA newsletters was a flash drive. Labeled Incident Files. It wasn't encrypted. It wasn't even hidden well. And when our tech specialist popped it open, it exploded like fireworks over a dry prairie. Inside were folders, labeled by address, by homeowner, by alleged violations. Dozens of them. She'd been spying on neighbors for months. Maybe longer. There were time-stamped drone clips, audio recordings from HOA meetings that hadn't been public, even candid photos of residents in their backyards. Not just me. Not just Ellie. Everyone. One folder was labeled Threats. It contained screenshots of emails Karen had sent anonymously, harassing notes disguised as warnings from an imaginary concerned HOA subcommittee. Another was labeled Evidence for Court, if needed. It had edited photos, cropped text messages, even manipulated invoices made to look like neighbors had unpaid fines. This wasn't HOA administration. This was a blackmail kit. And she kept it on a flash drive with a label like she was proud of it. I reviewed every frame, every document, every disturbing little revelation. Karen had built herself a digital fortress of control so she could scare people into submission. And for years, it had worked. But not anymore. I set everything to the DA's office, who moved quickly. Faster than I expected, honestly. Within 24 hours, they issued charges for criminal harassment, illegal surveillance, theft of personal property, and reckless endangerment of a minor. There were murmurs of more to come, depending on what else turned up. And yet, Karen hadn't been arrested. Not yet. Why? Because she'd lawyered up fast. Some downtown firm probably owed her ex-husband favors, and they filed every delay they could. Motion to dismiss. Motion to suppress. Motion to relocate jurisdiction. But nothing stuck. The DA was steady, methodical, and determined. Meanwhile, Lone Mesa Estates was in open revolt. By the end of that week, the community center was packed, standing room only. I went because Ellie wanted to. She said she had something to say. I didn't know what, but I wasn't about to tell her no. Karen didn't show. Her attorney did, standing stiff in a gray suit in the back, probably to monitor potential liability. The HOA president pro tem, a nervous man named Leonard Withers who had the voice of a turtle and the posture of a coat rack, called the meeting to order. We'd like to open the floor for resident statements. Ellie stood up first. 16, in jeans and a red flannel shirt, clutching a folded piece of paper. My name is Ellie Dawson. I live on the ranch next door. Some of you know me from the chicken rescue we did last fall. A few nods, one quiet yes. I just want to say, I didn't know what harassment really meant until this year. I didn't know adults could be so good at pretending to care about rules while really just trying to hurt people. She paused. But I'm not afraid of her anymore. And I hope none of you are either. Silence. Then applause. Scattered, then growing, until half the room was on their feet. I'd never been prouder. By the end of the meeting, 3 board members had resigned. Leonard Withers nominated a special ethics committee to audit all HOA activities from the past 5 years. And someone, maybe it was Mrs. Collins from the South Cul-de-sac, stood up and shouted, "Let's rename Karen's golf cart trail after Ellie." Everyone laughed. Ellie blushed. But the war wasn't over. Because Karen's lawyers had just filed a defamation counterclaim. And she was about to take things even further. The subpoena landed on my porch like a dead crow. Ellie found it first, sealed in a manila envelope, propped against the doorframe with a red urgent sticker slapped on the corner. Her hands trembled when she brought it to me. I unfolded it slowly. A formal summons, drafted in neat legalese, summoning both of us, father and daughter, to civil court. Karen's legal team was suing for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and slander of character. They'd attached screenshots from the community meeting, a quote from Ellie's statement, and a particularly unflattering photo of me taken as I walked past her house the day we served the warrant. Ellie leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, trying to stay strong. Can she really do this? She can file anything she wants, I said. The court will decide what sticks. Do we need a lawyer? We already have one. I called Andrea Fields, a woman I'd gone to the academy with years ago before she pivoted into law. She specialized in municipal code disputes and had taken down her share of crooked HOA boards. The moment I explained what was happening, she said one sentence I'll never forget. She's throwing lawsuits because she knows the walls are closing in. Over the next few days, Lone Mesa became a powder keg. Karen stayed locked in her home. Rumor was, she had private security. Her attorney issued a press release that painted her as a dedicated civil servant wrongfully persecuted by local law enforcement for political reasons. It was laughable, until the local paper picked it up. Suddenly, headlines screamed, Sheriff's daughter sparks legal battle with HOA president and is this a feud, or abuse of power? I stared at the headlines over morning coffee and felt something tighten in my chest. This was what she wanted, to shift the narrative, muddy the water. Ellie read the articles too. I found her sitting behind the barn later that day, Sassy nestled in her lap. Am I the bad guy now? No, I said. But sometimes the people doing the right thing still get blamed when they shine a light into dark corners. She didn't say anything for a while. Then, I want to fight back. I smiled. We are. That evening, Andrea arrived with files, hundreds of pages. And one of them changed everything. Her HOA charter, Andrea said, dropping it on the table. The original version, plus every amendment since inception. Notice anything? I scanned the pages. Dates. Signatures. And then, a discrepancy. Wait, I said. This change to the Enforcement Powers Clause, wasn't that last year? Exactly, Andrea said. But look at the timestamp. This version was filed 3 weeks before the public vote. Which, by their own bylaws, makes it invalid. Every action taken under that change? Technically void. My eyes widened. Karen had manipulated the charter, retroactively, and used that fake authority to issue citations, fines, even push lawsuits. This wasn't just overreach. This was fraud. Andrea grinned. We're not countersuing anymore. We're going nuclear. We filed a formal motion to dismiss the defamation suit with prejudice, citing fraud and procedural abuse. But more than that, we filed an injunction to freeze all HOA activities until a full audit could be completed by an independent investigator. Within 48 hours, Karen was hit with a formal cease and desist order from the state attorney general's office. But that wasn't the headline the news chose. The one that hit the front page? HOA president under state investigation, ranch sheriff and daughter at center of scandal. Suddenly, people weren't whispering about us in grocery stores, they were sending us pies. Ellie got hand-painted thank you notes from kids on her bus route. People who'd been too afraid to speak up finally stepped forward. Stories spilled out, fines for wind chimes, violations for non-neutral paint tones, one woman even cited for her garden gnome evoking pagan symbolism. The HOA was imploding. And yet, Karen still hadn't given up. I found out when our mailbox exploded. Not literally, but close enough. One night, just after sunset, we heard a metallic clank outside. I opened the door and saw it. Our mailbox had been ripped open, its hinges bent. Inside were the charred remains of a legal document, half burned and soaked in something that smelled like lighter fluid. A coward's message. I called the fire marshal, then filed a criminal complaint. But that wasn't what worried me. What worried me was the last line still visible on the half-burned letter. It read, "This is your final notice." Karen wasn't out of tricks yet. And the next move she made would be her last. The morning after the mailbox incident, I didn't put on my uniform. I put on my suit. Charcoal gray. Pressed. The one I wore to my wife's memorial service, and again when I got sworn in as sheriff. Today, it felt like armor. Because today wasn't about playing defense. Today, we were going to end this. Ellie sat across from me at the breakfast table, her eyes sharp and unreadable. She'd changed, my girl. The bright-eyed teen who once cried over a lost hen had grown steel in her spine and fire in her chest. I saw her mother in that glare. Stubborn. Brave. Ready. Andrea met us at the county courthouse with a team. Our motion to dissolve the HOA's operating board was on the docket. We'd filed it under the Homeowner Accountability Act, a rarely used provision that allowed residents to petition for emergency restructuring of a homeowners association if fraud, harassment, or unsafe conditions were proven. And we had proof. More than enough. When Karen entered the courtroom, the temperature seemed to drop. She wore all black, as if she was mourning her own reputation. Her lawyer followed closely, whispering in her ear like a handler trying to restrain a cornered animal. The judge, a former Marine named Justice McCrae, looked over his glasses at the crowd and said, "Let's proceed." Andrea rose like a thundercloud. She laid it all out, the fake citations, the falsified charter amendments, the drone footage, the note threatening Ellie, the HOA funds misallocated to Karen's private expenses, and the attempted intimidation tactics, including the mailbox incident. Then she played the video from the trail cam. The one that showed Ellie chasing after Sassy. The one that captured Karen's SUV at 3:23 a.m. Finally, she submitted the photos, the scorched envelope from our mailbox, the legal language still visible beneath the ash. Karen's attorney objected. Claimed coincidence. Coincidence? Then Andrea dropped the final hammer. Bank statements. Karen had written herself reimbursements for community security operations totaling nearly $19,000 over the past 18 months. Included in those transactions, the purchase of surveillance equipment, fencing she installed around her backyard, and a GPS drone model identical to the one that buzzed Ellie's coupe. The courtroom was silent. Karen stood. Trembling. "Your Honor," she said, voice cracking like a frozen branch. "They're trying to destroy me. I've protected that community. Those people need someone to lead them. Without me, they'll fall apart." McCrae looked over his glasses again. "Ma'am, it appears you've led them into the ground." Then he banged the gavel. "The HOA board is hereby dissolved effective immediately, pending a full independent audit. All enforcement actions and citations are suspended. And Ms. Holloway, due to the severity of the accusations, this court is recommending a criminal investigation. Bailiff, please escort her outside." Karen screamed. Actually screamed. Like a kettle let off the stove. The bailiff didn't flinch. He guided her out with calm authority as flashbulbs from the waiting press began popping in the hallway beyond. I stood with Ellie as the courtroom emptied. People shook our hands. Some cried. One woman gave Ellie a small wooden chicken carved with the words, "Thank you for standing your ground." Later that week, as we repaired the mailbox, Ellie asked me something I didn't expect. "Do you think she ever believed she was doing the right thing?" I thought about it. About the power, the control, the desperate need to feel important. "Maybe once," I said. "But power doesn't corrupt. It reveals." And what she revealed wasn't someone worth following. The new HOA committee formed 2 months later. They started fresh. No politics. No secret files. No backyard surveillance. Ellie was invited to speak at their first meeting. She declined. "I'm good," she said, hammering a fresh hinge onto the new coupe door. I've got chickens to raise. And I stood back and watched her. She didn't need a title. She had something better. Respect. Peace. Her land. And not a single HOA member in sight.